The Ukrainians have been able to liberate 50% of the territory originally occupied by Russia. They have opened a corridor in the Black Sea, enabling export of grain by sinking many of the Russian ships in the Black Sea fleet. Then, of course, that's not enough. We need to do more, and that's the reason why the main message is that we need to step up and provide even more support for Ukraine, and that's urgent.
You have put forward a new proposal for €100 billion.
Well, I will not go into the specifics of what I proposed, but I have made proposals on how we can further strengthen NATO's support to Ukraine to create a more robust and institutionalized framework, so we have a more predictable long-term commitment, that we're less dependent on short-term offers, voluntary.
Good morning and welcome to the channel. I'm Brian Lusk. Thank you for joining me today. That was NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg talking about the situation in Ukraine and the amazing progress that, if you look at the overall situation, shows that Ukraine has a real dog in this fight. And it's, as they say, it's not the size of the dog in the fight, but the size of the fight in the dog. So, good morning, Lucille and Jerry. Glad to have you both here. We are just getting fired up, as you can tell. You might even be able to hear the church bells ringing in the background with the hymn playing. But either way, I think we're ready to get fired up. Let's go ahead and move on to what kind of exciting things are going on in Ukraine. There we go. We're going to start off with a little bit of information out of Iran and kind of how it ties in with Ukraine for a little bit here. So let's go ahead and get started on that. This is talking about the Iran airstrike against Israel that took place over the weekend, talking about the overall situation on it. There were only a few of the ballistic missiles that actually penetrated. The damage done was minor from all reports, with no actual deaths involved. A lot of people have been talking about how this was likely more kinetic diplomacy than actually intending to cause major damage. However, the Institute for the Study of War is making the case that it was intended to do more. It was intended to do more than it did, and the fact that it did not do more damage than it did, even if they had not killed anybody or anything like that, the fact that the damage done was so minor indicates that this was a failure from a kinetic diplomacy standpoint. As it is, we've been hearing the word that Israel is planning a response strike sometime in the next 24 to 48 hours. We'll see if that comes through. The thing is, though, that this strike package basically mirrored exactly what Russia has been doing in Ukraine. Their most successful recent strikes look very similar to what Iran did just the other day. They used multiple types of vehicles. They've overwhelmed the air defense systems of Ukraine, and with the combination of slow Shahed drones that are sent in first, then followed with ballistic missiles, Kinzhal hypersonic missiles, all these other higher tech items. The airspace is then so saturated with targets that the air defense systems that Ukraine has get overwhelmed by it. Iran, unfortunately, from their perspective, fortunately from Israel's perspective, does not have the weak air defense that, the Israelis don't have a weak air defense, which is what the Russians are counting on in Ukraine, is that the air defenses in Ukraine have been stretched to the limit. They've been working day and night. They've been just literally draining their stocks of missiles, interceptors, and equipment. The Ukrainians don't have a significant air force as well. They have a few airplanes. So they aren't able to do some of the things that Israel was able to do. On top of that, Israel called on the United States, the United Kingdom, I believe the French were even involved in it, and Jordan and Saudi Arabia. They all provided airplanes to intercept and shoot down many of the missiles before they could get more than 100 kilometers away from Iran. So if you look at it from the perspective of kinetic diplomacy, this was a well-telegraphed strike. The Shahed drones were launched 10 hours in advance before the rest of the strike package was launched. I mean, we're talking a very much clear that this was probably intended to be kinetic diplomacy rather than a strike intended to cause a full-on war. But even so, it's clear that the United States, the United Kingdom, that France have the ability to close that airspace, shut down those strike packages. And the fact that they have not been doing so for Ukraine has now been thrown into very stark relief. There has been a lot of real challenges for Ukrainian supporters right now that are looking at this and going, really? Is this what kind of an ally we are now? And it's really been frustrating. It's been frustrating for me to read it, to be honest. Also from the Institute for the Study of War, Israel's success in defending against large-scale Iranian missile and drone strikes from Iranian territory on April 13th underscores the vulnerabilities that Ukrainian geography and the continued degradation of Ukraine's air defense umbrella pose for Ukrainian efforts to defend against regular Russian missile and drone strikes. There's a lot of factors here. And this really does kind of show that there are challenges for Ukraine that Israel does not have, that they are not facing. Number one, there is no direct border between Iran and Israel. Now, Iran uses their proxies in Lebanon and, of course, the Gaza Strip to launch some of their attacks. So they do have common borders, but they are not direct borders with that country. So there's no land invasion that's going to come from Iran to cause that real issue there. The exhaustion of U.S.-provided air defenses resulting from delays in the resumption of U.S. military assistance to Ukraine, combined with improvements in Russian strike tactics, have led to increasing effectiveness of the Russian strike campaign in Ukraine. The truth is that the limited number of interceptor missiles and the lack of financial and equipment assistance coming from the United States at this point in time has meant that things like that large power generating facility over into the Kiev Oblast, that was destroyed. It was being protected, but the sheer volume of repeated strikes has drained Ukraine's air defense capabilities to the point where where they're able to get through now. And this is not good for Ukraine. It's kind of like what Ukraine's been doing to Crimea all this time. They've managed to successfully identify, locate, and put strikes into Crimea almost at will, using much the same process and procedures. They're also able to do the same thing by sending drones deep into Russian territory, where air defenses are meager at best. They're both taking advantage of each other's disadvantages right now and finding their weaknesses. It's not a pretty picture. President Zelensky did release a statement on the situation in Iran, saying, "We in Ukraine know very well the horror. It is critical that the U.S. Congress makes the necessary decisions to strengthen America's allies at this critical time." As he also observed, to protect Israel, which is not a NATO member, Western countries did not need an Article 5 of the alliance, call. The same is possible in relation to Ukraine. Political will is needed. Czech politicians jumped on board that, saying that the Ukrainians should get the same support that Israel did after Iran's strikes, calling for more Allied assistance, sending in fighter jets, closing the airspace, all the things that would result in a better situation for Ukraine overall if they would do it. The Polish, they've been talking with Poland, the Ukrainians have, saying that everything is possible. And they've actually kind of asked Poland, could you move some of your air defense systems to your borders and use them to shoot down stuff in our airspace instead? Something to protect those borders, and would also protect yours as well. So will they? I don't know, but it is an interesting ongoing negotiation. A little side note that came up is apparently Princess Salma of Jordan personally jumped into a fighter jet and intercepted and shot down 6 Iranian drones during the attack on Israel. If you look at the relationship between Jordan and Israel just a decade or so ago, this is a huge change. This is enormous for Israel. To give you a clue here, however, Russia their propagandists have already been going overboard on the situation, saying that they hope Iran shoots down Israeli and American airplanes and wishes Iran victory. This is where the mask comes off. They are absolutely showing who they are and who their true alliances are with. They're not even considering that for decades, Israel and Russia had a fairly good relationship. I'm not wonderful, but good. Of course, Israel had maintained good relationships with the Americans and and other European allies, and was trying to get as much positive goodwill going for them as they could. But all it took was this one incident for Russia to take the mask off and say, "That's right. We know who we really support in the region, and it is in Israel." So that's kind of the air defense situation. Ukraine's got a tough situation they're looking at. They want more Patriot systems. They want more air defense systems. They need more missiles and interceptors. Otherwise, their infrastructure is going to be destroyed. I think I've got this later, and if I do, I'll touch it then as well. But somebody said, look at how expensive it is to rebuild a power plant like the one in the Kiev region. It's tremendously expensive. Far cheaper it would be to defend that plant, prevent it from being destroyed, than to rebuild that plant afterwards. And that's one of the things that needs to be pointed out regularly. Hi, Robbie. Glad to have you on board today, and thank you. I've been doing green screen work on my gaming stuff for quite a while. I'm now trying to bring it over to this side so that we can kind of get a tidier arrangement here. So I really appreciate it. Thank you. A strike over the weekend was carried out and struck a command point in Russian-occupied Crimea with top Russian officials, or they said at least. This is according to Ukraine's military intelligence. There were explosions reported over the weekend, including the shutdown of the Crimea Bridge. And, of course, every time they shut down the Crimea Bridge, everybody's like, ooh, is this it? Is this it? 99% of the time, it is not it. It is just merely is the wrong word, but it is Ukraine striking other vital targets. Much like the air defenses we were talking about a moment ago, Ukraine is able to regularly hit targets in Crimea, overwhelming what little air defenses are left over there, and be able to make these strikes happen. I spoke briefly about the power plant in the Kiev region. Energoatom has reported building new power units at the Khmelnytskyi nuclear plant. And this is, I thought this was really interesting because they actually go into a little bit more about what they're doing here. In fact, they're going to install some new reactors in the location built according to AP1000 standards. Now, I am not a nuclear physicist. I am not a nuclear reactor specialist. This is just the information I was researching. So if there are inaccuracies, they're not intentional. I'm just trying to give you some basic information. These AP1000 reactors are smaller pressurized water reactors. They are tremendously safe for nuclear reactors. In fact, they're designed to have passive fail-safes that if anything goes wrong with them, they basically shut themselves down or prevent themselves from running away, rather than having to be actively involved. Literally, you can do nothing, literally nothing in the control room, and the reactor will stop itself from becoming a problem. These new units. There have actually been, I think, 4 built in China, but the design is actually from an American company by the name of Westinghouse. And there are quite a few being proposed and built in the area. The only reason the U.S. hasn't built any is because of regulatory intervention here. There was some controversy about this AP1000 initially. There were some people that said that they thought the passive pressure unit wasn't sufficiently robust. They redesigned it to take care of that issue. But overall, this is still a very interesting change. The other effect of adding these 2 power units to the Khmelnytskyi nuclear power plant is that this will then make this the new largest nuclear power plant in the world. Or at least in Europe. It might not be the world, but I know for sure it would be the largest in Europe. And this, with this much power being generated, it'll be a great assist to Ukraine in keeping their lights on despite Russia's continued striking of their energy infrastructure. But I thought that was really interesting, especially the little extra bit of information on the AP1000. Very interesting, and it might actually help with overall keeping the power units balanced and capable to keep working. Moving on to news kind of out of Ukraine, I've got a few little tidbits here. The first Ukrainian pilots have undergone intensive training under the guidance of the Royal Air Force and have graduated. They're now moving over to France for the next stage of training. No word on exactly how many of these are stages there are. At least I've not been able to find anything just yet. If there's anybody who is familiar with the situation, please let me know. Russians struck the Kharkiv Oblast and killed 2 people with an aerial guided bomb. This is Kharkiv looks like it might be the next major target for Russia. There's a couple that we're going to be talking about. I've got more on that in a bit when we talk about the deteriorating frontline situation. But these are Russians using their equivalent to the American guided bombs. So they're getting larger. They're using them more often. They're lobbing them from farther away to keep out of air defense range. It's not a pretty situation. Ukraine has said they're allocating $6 billion for arms procurement in 2024. That is part of their $40 billion defense budget for the year. Ukraine has appointed a new Western Operational commander over there, General Volodymyr Shvediak, and he started, I believe, yesterday. And a little bit of information about Ukraine's sea drones. They're getting really high tech over there, and they're getting bigger. Now, this one could carry up to a ton of explosives over a distance of over 1,000 kilometers away, and it's reported that they can operate in ways that are nearly invisible to Russian radar. How accurate that is, I don't know for sure, but look at that is some serious drone capability on the naval side over there. Moving over to the news out of Russia itself here. The Defense Intelligence update is Russia continues to advertise and seek to recruit foreign nationals to join the Russian armed forces to fight in Ukraine. The most recent leaflet, written in English, requests foreigners to join a special unit in the Russian army and highlights a monthly salary of $2,200, a signing-on payment of $2,000, a Russian passport, free medical treatment, and training. Their online recruitment advertisements were distributed during the middle of 2023, appealing to citizens of neighboring countries such as Armenia and Kazakhstan, with monthly salary offers of $1,973 and a signing-on payment of $5,140. They've also been approaching Central Asian migrants, and they've also worked on India and Nepal. These are probably mostly migrant soldiers that are being recruited and coerced to fight under these false pretenses or with these financial incentives, with the probably goal to get them integrated into rather regular units, most likely their meat wave type units, instead of their special forces type units. They believe this is to avoid further domestic mobilization measures that are wildly unpopular over in Russia. Even though Russia's still managing to mobilize around 30,000 troops a month, they're losing pretty much that exact same number. Russian forces moved trained dolphins to a harbor in occupied Crimea. This has actually been going on for a while here. The Russians had trained dolphins for combat purposes, and I did a little bit further looking into that for a moment or two. And apparently, the idea is that the dolphins will alert their trainers if there's anything unusual in their water. Doesn't mean it's always a military diver in their water or something like that. Just that they do report when there is some kind of an oddity going on. Russia has been able to swiftly repair some of their oil refineries, dropping the amount of capacity idled down to 10% from almost 14%. No word on exactly how they pulled this off, though my understanding is that some of the drone strikes may have been less effective at taking out the special tower that they've got there compared to others. So they may have been able to patch something together into partial operation. Russian flooding continues to get worse. It's expanded to parts of Kazakhstan and other areas. The Tomsk River, I believe, is well overflowing its banks. The situation is getting rather grave. Let me pop over here. I've got more on this. Here's the Tomsk River, for instance. They washed away a road and partially destroyed a flow-directing dam. Let me tell you, water is a force that mankind never truly tames. They work with it, but in the end, the water will win. Water levels in the Tobol River near Kurgan exceeded 6 meters, with evacuation sirens sounding in the city. They also talk about the Tomsk River and Orenburg. There is an interesting story I think I've got right here. There we go. There was a village near Orenburg that built their own dam. They said they did it for a cost of about 3 million rubles and worked around the clock for 5 days because when they looked at the water level rise of the Ural River, they realized that their homes would end up flooded. So they raised the money, designed their own dam, and built it entirely without any assistance from the government. This is a 1.5 kilometer dam built out of clay, and they worked hard and did everything they could to do it. The fact that the government basically didn't care is really the takeaway from this. And in the end, they had to do with this entirely on their own. Russia's considering doing low-quality gasoline to make up for the shortages caused by Ukrainian attacks. However, this may damage their vehicles as well, and with the shortage of spare parts, it might be hard to keep their cars on the road. Maybe they shouldn't have attacked their neighbor. Russian billionaires and officials are actively editing Wikipedia articles about themselves after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. They're trying to wipe away any of the information tying them directly to the regime. They're trying to get rid of anything that talks about their luxurious lifestyles, anything that they can kind of do to get them to keep them out of the limelight in this regard. Let's go ahead and move over to the international situation here for a bit. The European Commission has approved a $53 billion reform plan for Ukraine. That's including a reform and investment strategy for the next 4 years, with Ukraine receiving regular and predictable support under the European Union's €50 billion euro Ukraine facility, they said. The United Kingdom's foreign secretary stated that if they deployed jets to protect Ukraine, that would lead to escalation. This appears to be a common theme that we hear on a regular basis, especially over here in the United States, is this idea that any particular action we might take might escalate the situation with Russia. This opinion time for just a moment or two. The truth is that Russia will continue to do this as long as it keeps working. Until somebody blackens their eye and pushes them back into their corner, they're going to keep threatening and keep escalating. That's the way they do it. And as long as we keep caving to that escalation, there will be no end. None. The Netherlands, Germany, and Canada are going to send drones to Ukraine. They are, let me get the number here, about 200 million euros will be sent there, with 450 Skyranger multi-mission drones and Hydron RQ-35 reconnaissance drones and more first-person view drones. The drones are really what's keeping Ukraine in the fight at this point in time. The Netherlands also allocated $4.7 billion to support Ukraine until 2026. This is that's basically, they're all budgeting money. At this point, these nations are budgeting money to help out Ukraine. They're getting it in their regular stuff here because this war is not ending anytime soon. U.S. Senator Chuck Schumer claimed that the congressional party leaders reached consensus on aid to Israel and Ukraine. Since this time, I have seen further articles from various sources indicating that Speaker Johnson will be introducing 4 separate bills. 3 of them will involve separately aid to Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan. And a 4th bill will be involving other items that are similar. But overall, it looks like the Republicans in the House are intending to keep those items separated as much as they can. And over in Georgia, the country, not the state, thousands of people have been demonstrating for the last several days over the adoption of a Russian law on foreign agents. It's been thousands upon thousands of people, and the crackdowns have been getting pretty fierce over there. The situation is getting increasingly tenuous. We're going to have to watch what goes on in Georgia because I think there's going to be some real sparks over there. Maybe it doesn't happen to catch any fires, but I'm definitely seeing sparks. Now on to the deteriorating situation on the front lines. According to the Kiev Post, the leader, Oleksandr Syrsky, has said Ukrainian forces are building more fortifications in the Kiev-controlled part of the Donetsk region to halt Russian advances. But the situation continues to deteriorate. He talks about the fact that Russia is continuing to push towards Chasiv Yar, which is a strategically important town. It's actually on an elevated area, significantly above the surrounding area. And this is, as they say, a litmus test for both sides. If Russia can't take it soon, it says that Russia's running out of gas. If Ukraine loses it, then it means that Ukraine is really struggling to maintain their own defenses. There's a lot of things going on here, but overall the situation continues to deteriorate with the lack of Western assistance. And the less artillery shells, the less missiles, the less ammunition they have, the harder it's going to be for Ukraine to keep it up. They are looking at the mobilization bill, hoping to get that done pretty quick here. That's dropped the age from 27 to 25 for mobilization. But the real issue at this point is the materiel shortage, with the Russians taking full advantage of the lack of artillery shells, the lack of equipment and the lack of additional gear showing up. In fact, it's believed that the Russian military leadership has set a goal to capture the town of Chasiv Yar by May 9th. By May 9th. That is apparently Russia's Victory Day, I believe it is called. And they really, if the Ukrainians could hold the town through that time, it will be a real black eye for Russia. But even so, Ukraine cannot afford to lose this town. Not at this point in time, because as soon as they get through that strong point there, there's some vitally important towns right behind there. And there's even signs that Russia may be setting up the situation to capture Kharkiv itself in, as Estonian chief of the general staff said, one fell swoop. He says the Russians are utilizing amoeba tactics with smaller amounts of troops or smaller formations, capturing smaller bits of territory a little bit at a time so they can gradually absorb more and more of Ukraine. The front lines, of course, we've got the latest information here with advances at Otrotine, Berdichi, Staromayorsk, and Krasnohorivka. Each of these are pretty small advances, so I don't see a need to jump into each one. I believe the only one that was actually in the city itself, I think was it Staromayorsk? No, I think it was... Yeah, Berdichi itself, and it's a village, so there you go. Russians attack with motorcycles and Chinese golf carts. Kind of what we were talking about a moment ago, where the Russians are using these amoeba tactics and smaller units. There was actually a group of Russian troops that jumped on motorcycles and attempted to assault Ukrainian positions. The first-person view drones had a field day, knocking these guys off their motorcycles and causing them to retreat. This is from late last week, early over the weekend, as I recall. There was a strike on a manufacturing plant, an engineering plant in Luhansk, and it was ready to go online for the repair of military equipment, but this attack knocked those plans back. So you can see the damage right there on the right-hand side. Here's Knoll Report's report on the situation in Berdichi, with additional advances into Simonivka after crossing and securing the pond area from the east. They were thrown back after a little bit of this initially, but the fighting continues there. Krasnohorivka, this was mainly south of the town, southeastern outskirts, and are continuing to push into residential areas. Tough town fighting going to be happening soon there. This is from Robotna here, and kind of a view of the situation overall. This is coming from Gray Zone, which is the Wagner-affiliated account. Take a look at this. This town, this village has been absolutely leveled. There is nothing left of the village except basements and ruins of houses around them. Let me get this a little bit bigger for you. The collapsed fortifications are there. They're mostly the ones that the Russians had built protecting the town. This is a moonscape with grass. People's homes and businesses were here. And you can see that it's the Russians continue to push in to try and take this town again. The Ukrainians continue to kick them right back out. But there's not much there. And this is the way Russia fights. If they can't have it, they flatten it. If they can't have it, nobody can have it. This is the Russian mindset. Kind of a brief talk about the situation in Krinky. Now, there was a push by the Russians that took a few positions near the center of Krinky itself. However, the Ukrainians took 500 meters of territory off to the west side and managed to secure even more territory overall. Krinky continues to be an interesting situation, and while no major changes are happening, it's clear that there are some pretty hard-fought battles going on right now. The thing is that the Russians have been dedicating more and more resources to the area, trying to get this place cleaned back up. In fact, they've claimed to have cleaned it out multiple times at this point, and yet continue to successfully not do so, for lack of a funnier way to say that. The Russians just are not able to kick the Ukrainians out of there. They would have to dedicate an enormous amount of resources to do so, and they are not willing to do so. Ukraine, for their part, would have to successfully get further forces and equipment across in order to be able to push farther out from Krinky. That's crossing the Dnipro River is a challenging situation for either side. In fact, the Russians tried to pull one off the other day and got their butts handed to them. It was not a pretty situation for them either. And that's the situation on the front lines. The situation over on the east near Chasiv Yar continues to deteriorate as it is right now. The situation near Krinky actually is holding pretty stable, across the Dnipro River region there. Robotna, again, stable, but a lot of fighting going on. Kharkiv continuing to get hit with Russian missiles and drones. It's pretty challenging. We're going to move on to some of the interesting extras here. A Poltava rescuer honored his colleagues who had fallen in a Russian strike by running the half marathon in Kiev. That's 21 kilometers while wearing full firefighter gear. That's dedication there, and that is really honoring his colleagues who fell to the Russian attacks. Just an interesting picture of the sky over the Luhansk region here. Looks like something right out of World War II. Ukrainian defenders rescued some newborn kittens whose mother was killed in Kupiansk direction. They made a feeder out of a glove, fed the kittens with milk for a week, and then handed them over to a clinic. Just as one who tends to end up with more cats than I can shake a stick at, because they are sick and wander onto my property, this really touches really close to home. And these little kittens, they did not deserve to lose their mother like this. And the other thing that's always amazed me is how much the Ukrainians love their animals. And if you want to see the true measure of a man or a true measure of the people, see how they treat their kittens, their animals. And I'm going to end off today with this, I believe it's a Metallica song that he's playing on this instrument here. But before I do, and I'm going to close out as he finishes off, so that there's no need to finish off the outro or anything like that. Thank you for joining me today. I'm glad you were here. I appreciate every one of you that shows up. I hope that the information you received today, even though this is a bit challenging, and it's challenging for Ukraine, I believe that there are better times ahead, and that soon there will be the assistance they need. And I hope that that is the case. So, all of my heart to Ukraine today. Well, good to finish off with this, and you have a great rest of your day. We'll see you on the next video.